small grade. When Zach was here, he had a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Remember?
The
whole image, I love it. We get it.
You don't realize it. You realize, you know, what school did you go to? Right, but it doesn't make any difference. I mean, even like Rutgers,
You guys take yourself to a cookie or water. It's crazy. I couldn't get over it.
and not only, right, you would get out early and save you a semester of room board.
You take some pictures?
Couple pictures, but now you're waiting until everybody.
And, you know, I never realized, and you know, I'm angry at myself. I told my daughter, senior year, she had AP, she had honors, AP Spanish, of which I said, Lord, your AP physics, chemistry, multivariable calculus. Are you taking me so much? If she had taken that every class, she could have gotten 9 credits for that one AP, 9 credits for just the AP Spanish. I'm like kicking myself. What I gotta say. Lauren for BC Cal got 2 courses. She started out with, I don't know if they're 3 or 4 credits apiece. She got calculus. She started with calculus 3. She got calculus
Are you ready to
Yeah. And they recommended. I got these for Eva.
Okay. That's cute. All right, I'll go tomorrow. Well, I lost Robin.
You're all in.
She put her stuff
Nice. That's funny, you know, like.
There you go, girl.
Yeah.
But if he was an All-American, he'd love it.
Ready?
Drum roll. Dun, 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 dun. Thank you very much. It is
Official ribbon
It
cut.
is the official opening, and we are very excited. It does look beautiful, and we're very grateful. And this was set up beautifully. Thank you. All right. All right. Let's open the door. Yay! Let's go to
I applied to Northeastern.
That was hysterical.
Welcome. Please have a cookie when you're in the auditorium. Hi, I'll take a peek.
Did we ever get these? Oh, thank you so much. Yes, thank you, because I don't know how long I'm going to last.
Okay, no, I'll be open.
Exactly.
All right.
Exactly. Move along. When you see me do it, move along.
Yeah, how are you? Good.
How are you? Good. How are you? How are you? Good.
Brian, are you filming anything right now?
Because no one's moving because they think you're all.
Nobody wants to go. Thank you, Brian.
May I have a roll call, please?
Yes, you may. Mr. Adenizio?
Here.
Ms. Bradley?
Here.
Ms. Connolly?
Here.
Mr. McGee? Here. Mr. MacArthur?
Here.
Ms. Malloy?
Here.
Mr. Sanfilippo?
He has an excused absence.
Mr. Wondrak? Here. Ms. Wanier?
Here. Please let the record show that Molly Kernis and Dave Roberts are here as our student representatives. And at this time, I will turn the meeting over to Mrs. Dyer.
Good evening, everyone, and members of the Board of Education. This evening, we're very happy to be able to welcome our guest from Ocean First Bank for a very special presentation. And before we do that, though, I would like to recognize some staff members, 4 of them in particular, who applied for the Ocean First Model Classroom Grant. And they did a tremendous amount of work in preparation of the grant application. And for their efforts, Ocean First has recognized 3 of them with Amazon gift cards for use in their makerspace projects in the media centers, and one of our schools with a substantial grant of $10,000. So please welcome at this time Caitlin Nessie and Kristen Morano, who authored 2 of the grant applications. Congratulations and thank you. And Kristen, congratulations and thank you.
Thank you.
And Megan Fleming and Heather Daniel, who authored the grant application for Wall Intermediate School, and that was the big winner. Congratulations and thank you. And you guys stay up here. Congratulations and thank you. And please join me. I don't know if you'd like to say a few words.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. My name is Linda Petrolito. I'm the branch manager for Ocean First, our Wall Township branch. And it is, I want to thank you for having me, and it is my pleasure, and we are very excited on behalf of the Ocean First Foundation to present you with the Model Classroom Grant of $10,000. Very nice job, ladies. Thank you.
We brought this big check.
They have the big check, but I got the good check.
Yeah, you have
The big things, yes, come in small packages.
Mr. Smythe, but maybe you want to take a picture with these lovely ladies. How's that? Thanks so much for your hard work. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for coming.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you so much for a wonderful holiday.
Thank you. Have a lovely holiday. Okay, at this time, we'll have the student representative report.
Good evening, Mrs. Zawodniak, Superintendent Dyer, and members of the Board of Education. October Pep Week was a success for the senior class. The classes came together and created amazing hallways, watched the teachers lose in Egg Smash, and cheered as the 2018 homecoming court was announced. On Halloween, leaders in the school and teacher volunteers participated in Challenge Day, where they learned about the importance of empathy and kindness. Dave and I both took on the challenge of continuing to better ourselves and others in the community. We would like to thank the high school administration, Superintendent Dyer, and the Board of Education for allowing us to participate. Hopefully the tradition of Challenge Day will continue for years to come. The end of October into November proved to be a busy time of the year for Wall High School student athletes. The varsity field hockey team made it to the state sectional final against Seneca, while the girls volleyball team played again at Georgian Court for the Shore Conference semifinals and in Rutherford for the state quarterfinals. Boys soccer played a tough game against Ocean in the third round of states, and football, although out of the state tournament, has been gearing up for their Thanksgiving game against Manasquan. Many varsity players received accolades for the division and Shore Conference, as well as invites to play in the All-Star Games. Additionally, there were 7 seniors to sign to Division I schools for the first term of next year on National Signing Day last week. We are very proud of our fall athletes for seeing great success this year and excited to see the results of the winter seasons.
In addition to our student athletes, other members of our senior student body are starting to receive acceptance letters from colleges. The rest of November and December will be an exciting time as many more acceptance letters will start to roll in. We wish the best of luck to our fellow classmates. Our Proud Knights of the Week, Students of the Month, and Students of the Marking Period were announced at the end of the first marking period. The honored students inspire the rest of Wall High School to continue to pursue academic and social excellence. And thank you once again, Mrs. Zawodniak, Superintendent Dyer, and members of the Board of Education for allowing us to speak on behalf of Wall High School. We hope you have a happy Thanksgiving.
And a happy Thanksgiving to you as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any questions for our representatives from board members? Okay, seeing none, you may go home to do homework and whatever else you have to do. Thank you so much for keeping us informed.
Excuse me, Ms. Keeter, would you mind checking the microphone on the podium? I'm not sure if I shut it off. Thank you.
Okay, so as part of my president's report, I would like to announce the Students of the Month and Knights of the Week. And for the month of October, the Students of the Month are 9th grader Grace Black, 10th grader Logan Peters, 11th grader Haley Merriman, and 12th grader Emily Rubino. And the Knights of the Week were 11th grader Carly Magliorisi, and that was for the week of October 5th, 12th grader Grace Gambaroni for the week of October 12th, 12th grader Tyler Lockerson for the week of October 19th, and 9th grader Megan Popola, and that was the week of October 26th. Congratulations to the students. And as has been our practice as of the last several months, we have been responding to issues raised at public comment at a board meeting by posting answers and responses on the website, and this month was no exception. We had responses posted from the in response to the October meeting on the website on November 2nd. Most of the responses are very self-explanatory. They were correcting some misinformation and some misconception. One of the items was a question about the accuracy of one of the presentations. That was our student achievement presentation, and that was cleared up. You can refer to the website. There were no errors on that report. It was a matter of students leaving the district, and that affected some of the numbers. In addition to that, we had some questions about moving forward with the transportation compound that will be housed in Howell Township. And as was stated at the meeting and on the website, that the board has done its due diligence. The administration has vetted the matter, and the board was quite satisfied with that, and they were comfortable, and that's why we unanimously approved that project. And then we had another issue that was in reference to an employee matter and a difference in W-2s as opposed to contract amounts. Mr. Gross, do you want to respond to that one.
Yeah, at the last meeting, there was some discussion about the inconsistency between a W-2 form and a contractual provision for an annual salary concerning the 04-05 school year. As I had said that evening, there were a review of the minutes of the meeting from December 14, 2004, show that there was a motion by the Board of Education at the end of that meeting that evening, which I will read. And it says that there was a motion by Mr. Lane, a second by Mr. Kerr, to approve option 3 as proposed by Dr. Habel, which states that he would assume the responsibilities of the business administrator, receiving no additional compensation. Margaret Mueller would become the board secretary. Mrs. Mueller and Brian Smythe will share the responsibilities for the day-to-day operation of the business office. Compensation in the amount of $40,000 will be split according to the recommendation of the superintendent. That was on December 14, and right after that, the motion, the board moved and second to adjourn that meeting. Those minutes certainly reflect not only the actions taken by the board with regard to the resignation of the then board secretary business administrator, but also the appointment by the board at that time for Ms. Mueller and Mr. Smythe to share the $40,000 to the responsibilities for the day-to-day operation for the remainder of the 04-05 school year. So any confusion as to where that additional compensation comes from would certainly be reflected in those minutes. I will point out that there was a clerical error in those minutes that from 14 years ago, when you look at them very carefully, in that there was no recorded roll call vote under that motion. There was one for the motion preceding that, dealing with Mr. Hahn's resignation. And then, as I said, right after that motion that was made and seconded by Mr. Lane and Mr. Kerr, after that action was taken, the board moved to adjourn the meeting. So we all know that after this meeting was over, Mr. Smythe and Ms. Mueller did assume those responsibilities. They were performing those responsibilities. They were compensated for that $40,000, and there was no mention of those actions in any subsequent Board of Education meeting until July 2005, where at that point in time the board was looking to fill the position on an interim basis for the 05-06 school year. So there's no question that that motion was approved on December 14, 2004.
Thank you. I just wanted to add that there were many, many community and school events since the last board meeting, and I had the pleasure of attending quite a number of them. We had a Wall High School football player, Joseph Shimko, invited to participate in the U.S. Army All-American Bowl. We had as our reps stated, we had Wall High School participating in Challenge Day on October 31st, and I was able to go look at it for a very few minutes at a time when outsiders were allowed to observe. And it seemed like a very positive reaction from all who participated. On November 7th, there was at Wall High School a Community Veterans Day celebration, which was absolutely fabulous. It's a wonderful program that was developed by Tracy Skinner at the high school, and our own Mr. Wondrak was a guest keynote speaker at that event, and it was absolutely lovely. And there was a community veterans ceremony to honor World War II hero Major General Harry Rockefeller, and a statue was dedicated in his honor. I had the pleasure of attending that. Actually, at the community event that we had at the high school, Mrs. Bradley was able to attend that as well, and the one at Town Hall, Mrs. Connolly also was able to attend. There was the Crimson Knights Foundation Gala, which was a success, the first one, and I hope in a long tradition of future gala events. Central School had its theater week, and the Wall High School put on their drama, which was Don't Drink the Water. That was very, very entertaining. So that concludes my president's report. Mrs. Dyer?
Thank you. With regard to superintendent's updates, I will say that I think I was at all of those same events, and they were great. Really just an awesome Veterans Day celebration that our Service and Leadership Academy has put together now for the second year under the supervision of the humanities supervisor, Dr. Tracy Skinner, and the teacher of that program, Mr. Frank Harrison. And it really just was such a moving and lovely event. And again, thank you, Mr. Wondrak, for your remarks on that day. I'll talk more about what's coming, since Mrs. Zawodniak has talked about things that have already occurred. This week is Thanksgiving, so happy Thanksgiving to everyone. And I would also like to point out that, you know, we do have a rivalry against Manasquan High School, if any of you are not familiar. So there will be a football game on Thursday. It's at Manasquan this year. The game starts at 11. The high temperature for the day is expected to be 28 degrees. So looking forward to that. And at the same time, keep in mind, Mrs. Zawodniak mentioned that the Crimson Knights Foundation had a successful gala last week. They are also engaged in a rivalry with Manasquan. It's the Battle of the Foundations to see who can get the most donors between now and halftime at the football game. So if you go to Facebook and the website, the Crimson Knights Foundation website, there's a link to the GoFundMe page. And here's top secret information. It's not the dollar amount, it's the number of donors, right? So five $5 donations counts more than one $25 donation. You get the math? Right, okay. So it's important to get a lot of small donations is my my point there. And I believe there's a trophy, just like there's a trophy for the winning football team, there's a trophy for the winning foundation. So they definitely appreciate your support. Right now they're raising money to upgrade lighting in the high school auditorium at the high school. That's redundant. And also to fund some scholarships for graduating seniors. This will be their first time funding scholarships. And in the past, they've donated money to offset the cost of the sound system at the stadium. So again, all of that is greatly appreciated. At the gala, they recognized a alumni, a community member, and a staff member. So very fun evening, interesting speeches from Marissa Brainy, Channel 12 news anchor, Mr. Christopher Gramiccioni, the Monmouth County prosecutor, and Mr. Les Hollander, and they were the first three honorees. And then, between now and the next board meeting, we have pretty much close to a gabillion concerts to attend at the high school, the elementary schools, the intermediate school for the holiday season. So I hope many of you can come out and see what a wonderful music program we have in Wall Township. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Dyer. I didn't mean to not include you,
That's
but I
okay.
knew you were going to report on that yourself. So
I was there too.
You were there too. Thank you.
No worries.
Okay, so now we'll have Board of Education updates. Mrs. Connolly, do you have a few items for legislative?
I do. So with regards to legislative updates, there wasn't a lot of new information, just kind of the same things that we've been talking about with regards to bills and laws. What I did want to highlight quickly was the $500 million ballot question that was approved on Election Day, because there's been a lot of questions out there. Just so people know, the voters approved the $500 million. It'll pay for a wide range of initiatives aimed at upgrading educational facilities in New Jersey. It will fund the expansion of career training facilities at high schools and county colleges, upgrade school security, and protect students from lead, which has been an increasing problem in drinking water. $350 million of the bond issue will fund the building and equipping facilities geared for technical education programs in the state. which a detailed study that the New Jersey Business and Industry Association did. I might provide links to that in this article as well for you guys, because it was actually, I know it sounds very nerdy, but very interesting reading. In addition to that, a portion of the funds is going to be used to pay for school security upgrades. $50 million is targeted to county colleges to improve career training programs. And the final chunk of money, which is about $100 million, will fund fixing water systems in schools. Dealing with the Department of Education and reading all this, I'm assuming that Wall's probably going to not know right away how we'll benefit from any of this new money. It's really going to depend on how the regulations are developed, what the qualifications are, and what kind of programs we decide to move forward with, especially with technical education programming. So it's interesting information. It's exciting, and hopefully the money will be used well.
Thank you. Any questions for Allison from the board? Thank you. Seeing none. The Wall Community Alliance update, Mr. MacArthur.
Thank you. On November 1st, I attended the Wall Township Community Alliance along with Mrs. Wodniak. That evening, there was no quorum, so there was not much going on, but the committee did discuss the upcoming preparations for the Meatball Gala and project graduation, and they're both on track, and they're pretty excited, especially for the upcoming Meatball Gala. They're really looking forward to it.
Thank you very much. Mr. Adonisio, you were able to attend the CCAH in my absence. Do you
Yes.
have an update?
I do. I apologize. I forgot my official minutes, but Township Administrator Jeff Bertrand gave an update to the committee, and it pretty much is the same update that's been going around, that they've been working with the court master to make sure we're ahead of the game, and their feeling is Wall Township's in a better position than a lot of different municipalities. Wall's not going to settle for the amount that some of these other towns are settling for. They're accepting deals where what Wall Township believes would be a higher amount than we would be required to build. So their plan is not to settle for anything and see it through to the end. Other than that, there's really nothing new to report. It's been the same information that's been talked about over and over again. But they had some more dates set up with the court later, I believe it was this month, November.
Thank you very much, and thank you for attending in my absence. Mr. MacArthur, can you provide an update from the New Jersey School Boards Association Delegates Assembly?
Yes. This past Saturday, the 17th, myself and Mrs. Wodniak attended the New Jersey School Board Delegate Assembly in Trenton. There were no resolutions presented to the Delegate Assembly this fall, but there was, I would say, an extremely lively or engaging conversation regarding non-college bound learners and the state's initiatives of where they want to go and what they want to see for that, and also the hot topic of school consolidation or regionalization or curriculum alignment. They're not quite sure where they're pushing all this towards, but it was about a 2.5-hour conversation, and it's very interesting to hear what some of our colleagues from other municipalities and districts around have to say about it. So I look forward to this upcoming spring when they expect to have legislation pushing forward on that issue. And that was it.
Thank you. At this time, we'll move to committee reports. Mrs. Connolly, policy, please.
The policy committee met on November 7th and had, quite frankly, one of our quickest, most efficient meetings yet this year. In attendance were Board President Mrs. Wodniak, Superintendent Mrs. Dyer, myself, Mr. MacArthur, and Mr. Sanfilippo. I'm sure that you've all had a chance to review the minutes, but very quickly, pretty much everything that's being considered for first reading consists of a regulation where we had a policy, but for whatever reason didn't have the regulation yet on the books. So most of that's in there, and what you'll see is that most of them, the committee really didn't offer any changes to, either because they originated from administrative code or because the work had already been done to make sure that they were aligned with whatever is current practice in the district, and it really just reinforced policies that we already had on the books. And then with regards to, excuse me as I flip through all of the pages, with regards to second readings, there were none. And then we had an item that was up for discussion, which was policy 5230, which was late arrival and early dismissal. And after the conversation and a little bit of revamping for that, the committee decided to push that from discussion to first reading because we were happy with what we were able to come up with in the committee meeting. And that's it.
Thank you. Any questions from the board for Allison? So I just want to clarify for the board, you'll see after the policies, it says adopted instead of new. And so typically when a policy is brought forward from Strauss Esme and it's a brand new policy or regulation, we usually note that it's new. But since these were done prior by Strauss and it just, for some reason, the board never adopted them, so that's why we're using that other language. Okay, Mr. MacArthur, personnel.
Thank you again. On November 13th, the Personnel Committee met. In attendance was Robin Zawodniak, Mrs. Dyer, myself, Linda Bradley, and Mr. Wondrak. The committee discussed the Human Resources draft. We asked questions of Mrs. Dyer as they were posed, and they were answered. We also discussed administrative coverage here at the intermediate school. We discussed the ongoing need for coverage due to an intermittent leave of absence for one of the assistant principals. The WTEA has proposed the sidebar for a teacher in charge stipend. Mrs. Dyer agrees with the proposal and recommends that the Board of Ed approves the sidebar. The committee concurred with the recommendation. We discussed the need for the RAP program as it continues to grow. Mrs. Dyer is recommending increasing the hours of the RAP supervisor from 6 hours per day to 7 hours per day. The committee also agreed with the need for the increase. We also discussed the WTASC has requested a sidebar to provide a stipend for the school safety specialist. Mrs. Dyer has analyzed the amount of time needed for this position and had agreed that it requires many hours beyond the scope of an assistant principal. She supports the request for the stipend. The committee also agreed to that. We also discussed with Mrs. Dyer, provided the committee the information related to the recommendation for termination of an employee. The committee agreed that the termination was appropriate course of action. And again, tonight we're approving, looking for approval for the HR report, the sidebar with the WTEA, and the sidebar for with the WTASC, and submitted by me. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the board for Mr. MacArthur? Seeing none, we'll move to curriculum and instruction. Mrs. Connolly?
Absolutely. The curriculum committee also met on November 7th. We discussed the speaking and listening standards, just basically how they're being integrated in the elementary school, intermediate school, and high school. Learned that they're basically a part of everyday life at the elementary school and more primarily focused into the ELA program at the intermediate school and the high school. And the committee discussed with Dr. Gleason different ways that we could incorporate those skills into things beyond ELA, like the Steve Tank Challenge and other places where they would be pertinent. We discussed the all-wall band proposal, including the rationale, anticipated student outcomes, timeline, and anticipated budget. From that information, a quote, "The creation of an all-wall band would establish parity between musical programs in the district. At this time, there's no combined ensemble opportunity for elementary students who play band instruments. The program would provide genuine articulation and an ease of transition that are currently lacking between the elementary and intermediate school programs, and it seems like a really interesting and good opportunity for these students, and the committee was excited to hear about it." Dr. Gleason gave us an update on a computer science grant. The NJDOE is offering a computer science grant up to $100,000 to enhance computer science initiatives with specific parameters. A team was put together and completed the grant application seeking about $48,000 to develop an AP Computer Science A course. If successful, the grant would be used to offset the cost of curriculum writing, the requisite data management system, etc. So we talked about that, and if I remember correctly, Dr. Gleason said we'd probably be hearing about it soonish. finish. So we're going to keep our fingers crossed that that's a successful grant application. Dr. Gleason, also updated the Committee on Response to Intervention and let us know that there's going to be a parent university on the topic in the future, and just let us know how well that program is being utilized and updated within the district. And beyond that, we talked a couple of non-agenda items about assemblies, how and when they're planned, what grades and audiences they're geared for, and also about a really incredible document. I know it sounds silly, but it comes from a personal passion, but a really great document that was put together by one of the substitute supervisors that shows how Holocaust and Amistad education are integrated in our K through 12 curriculum. It's not only going to help with CUSAC, but apparently it's become a model document for other schools and districts in the state, which is nice. So that's the curriculum report.
Thank you, Allison. Any questions from the board for Allison? Seeing none, we'll move to Finance and Facilities. Mr. Adonisio?
Thank you. Finance and Facilities met on November 5th. We started at 5 o'clock. We ended at 7:20. And in attendance was Board President Robin Zwaniak, Superintendent Cheryl Dyer, Business Administrator Brian Smythe, Mr. McGee, Mr. Wondrak, and myself. First on the agenda was the school bus rebate program. As we've done in the past, we applied to the EPA. Selection letters for the school bus rebate program are scheduled to be mailed out in January 2019. The enterprise account, which consists of food service and also the WRAP program. October had 22 days where items were sold in our schools, which is the same as last year. For the month, we were close to $5,000 more than last year. For the year, we're down $22,266.09. It's also important to remember as the year goes on, we make this number up as we have in the past several years. And the superintendent reported that the WRAP program reported this month that everyone paid their bill on time. Health benefits. Brown & Brown has gone out to market for vendors for quotes. F&F should have proposals by the end of November. As of now, 2 companies declined to quote because they could not be competitive to what we have now. Revised resolution accepting non-public initiative allocations for security, nursing, technology, and textbooks. If you remember, this was on, I believe, last month's F&F agenda. The district received additional money for allocation for another non-public school. We'll be handling it the same way we do the non-public school money that the district receives. Facility project update. There was an attachment that was included and for the planned and ongoing projects listed. Currently planned projects are the high school boiler number 2 that needs some repairs for $4,289. Allenwood School boiler number 1, which has a lower pass tube seal that needs to be welded due to leaks for $2,974. Central School boiler condensation tank replacement because the old one was leaking for $8,495. High school generator update. This project's in process, and it's for $377,976. It was started the week of November 5th and should be substantially completed by February 11th, 2019. The current plan has the changeover being done in one day. When this happens, the school will be without backup power. The district will try to have it done on a weekend or on a scheduled day off if possible, so we don't worry about not having backup power. Resolution for submission of other capital projects, Walter Intermediate School auditorium seating. This is on the agenda for approval, so we can send it to the State Department of Education for other capital improvements. Facility use applications. So we had a discussion about 2 facility use requests that the business office received that are much longer than what's currently approved on a regular basis. We have a church called Liquid Church that is looking to have 2 services on Sundays. They would also need several classrooms for Sunday school as part of their application. They would be using the auditorium in the high school and have screens set up so they can broadcast the service from their main location. They would be looking to use our facilities from 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. for 51 weeks. They do not hold services between the week between Christmas and New Year. We also received a request for summer camp to be run by the SYBC. They would want to use one of our elementary schools.
The camp would have between 100 and 300 students, and the size would be dictated by our district. So the committee had a discussion on these two applications and asked questions. After discussion on the policy, the committee would like to get more information. Currently, the church uses another school in North Jersey. Administration was going to talk to our attorney as well as the district they're currently in to see if there's any problems. Since these two requests are outside what is normally approved by the district, the committee feels the whole board should be part of the process with questions and whether this is something the district should explore. Everyone on the board is encouraged to refresh themselves with the board policy and regulation regarding the use of school facilities and the strategic plan. Moving on, we received the Ocean First Model Classroom Grants, as you saw this evening. Intermediate school, fantastic job, $10,000 grant. Central, Old Mill, and West Belmar each received $500 model classroom participation grants. And Massaquan Bank Charitable Foundation awarded a $1,500 grant to the Wall Business Academy. This is used so the students can get paid $10 an hour when they're working for a nonprofit, so the nonprofit doesn't have to pay them. Long-range facility plan. The committee had a discussion on the attached long-range facility plan draft. The priorities of each school were gone over. Currently, the items listed are more than the money we had allocated for what was going to be the bus compound. Every school has different needs. As per the draft, if we were to air condition all remaining classrooms in the district, it would cost approximately $1.7 million. We will be looking into shared services with the township and county for possible engineering and paving work to save money. This is only a draft, and it will be refined as we receive estimates for work. The 2019-20 annual school budget. The budget calendar will be out later this month. The district's in the early stages of developing the budget, and F&F will be updated as the budget process moves forward. So tonight we're looking for approval for the non-public initiative allocations and acceptance of the Ocean First grants. And that was everything. Respectfully submitted by me.
Thank you, Ralph. Any questions from board members for Ralph? Seeing none, we'll move on.
Madam President?
Yes.
When did we want to open up for discussion on the two applications?
Well, did you want to?
Well, I think there's two subjects from F&F that we wanted to have a discussion with the full board. One being the facility use applications, and the other being the long-range facility plan and the projects we're looking to possibly reallocate funds during the current school year. So I'd like to have the board discuss the facility use application. I mean, we have the two applications that we discussed, and they don't have to be discussed in specifics, but more conceptually. You know, the one being used during the school year and throughout the summer, it's 1 day a week. It's the service that's going to be held on a Sunday, and then the other type of application is one that would utilize a facility or possibly more, because there have been other inquiries with regard to holding summer camps at our facilities over the course of just the summer, over approximately 7 to 8 weeks. You know, there are facility use application fees that we would be receiving for those uses, as well as reimbursable costs for custodial services and for security. And the first, I guess, task that we would need to determine is whether we could accommodate the application. I think the one being used 1 day a week on a Sunday, we can easily accommodate any application for use in the summer, especially for an extended period of time, and that would take up a large amount of one of our schools, or if not more than one of our schools, would partly be dependent on what type of capital projects we're looking to approve or plan for this summer. So although the facility use application is first, that would have the determination or the discussion by the board with regard to the long-range facility plan and any capital projects would have to be considered in at least, if not both, especially the ones, any application that would be used for the summer.
So,
I can continue if you want.
No, the only thing I was going to say was that I guess the reason why we felt it should come to the whole board is because this is something outside of what is normally handled by the business office. We're talking about a commitment for 51 weeks for one of our facilities on a Sunday that we normally don't run things or have events here on a regular basis, which one of the things we kind of talked about was that if we wanted to do any kind of improvements there, we wouldn't be able to do it during that time because we would have committed this space. I don't know if you kind of had rough ideas for numbers. Did you want to?
Well, with regard to the use of the high school auditorium and approximately 9 classrooms for a Sunday school type function over the course of 51 weeks, it's approximately $85,000 in revenue. So when we bring this to FNF, one of the district goals, one of the strategic plan goals is to obtain alternate sources of revenue or to expand our facility use policy to bring in alternate sources of revenue, and that would be a revenue of approximately $85,000. That's not considering the reimbursable costs for custodial services or security. Those costs would be billed on top of that. I'm just specifically referring to the facility use fee in accordance with our policy. We have $750 for the use of the auditorium for a 5-hour block, which I believe would fit their need. And then we have classroom fees, which are on a per diem basis that we would charge for 51 weeks of the year. I followed up with the other districts that currently accommodate this group in the same fashion that we would. There was 3 districts. Every one of them gave a very good reference, and one district has had them for over 3 years and is looking forward to continuing the relationship. And it would be very similar to the arrangement that we would have.
Do you think that there are any projects coming down the pike that would
Well, with regard to the auditorium at the high school, we do have the ability to relocate them to this location in the event that we did have a planned project. So I think the high school auditorium is easier to accommodate or work around any planned projects that we have in there. Or we would just work the project around that facility use as well as we would work it around our own uses. I don't know of any expansive projects there that would prevent us from still being able to accommodate them, whether at the high school or the intermediate. A summer type camp that would occupy a building for 7 weeks is a different story. Like if we're looking, one of the discussions with regard to the long-range facility plan was air conditioning in schools. If we were going in and renovating 9 classrooms or 15 classrooms that would otherwise be used for a camp, we would not be able to house a camp if we were looking to do that type of project, because that would be a project we would do over the summer. So that would conflict. But part of the discussion is, it's an alternative source of revenue that the district can look to receive, $85,000 for 1 day a week. Some of the summer camps, you could generate revenue $100,000, if not more. So it's a lot more intense. It's a shorter duration, but there's some substantial revenue that you can generate. But 2, you have to coordinate that or accommodate that with capital projects, or not be able to do it with the capital projects. But at the same time, there's the philosophy of, these are outside groups that are using district facilities, on the weekend and also in the summer. And is the board okay with that? That's basically why I'm bringing it to the Finance Facilities Committee to bring to the board. It's an alternative source of revenue, but these are not Wall Township groups, utilizing our facility. These are outside groups using our facilities. So I think it should be a point of discussion with regard to the board being on board with that.
Can I ask a quick question with regards to the summer camp one? How do we mitigate, say, ESY when we have capital projects or something like that to do? Is that a shorter range and it makes it easier, or would this put us in a similar situation? I was just looking for maybe a comparison of some sort.
We really haven't had any capital projects.
Fair enough.
So, however, what we have done is relocated them, because we have one ESY and we have the ability to house it really at 5 schools, or at least 4 schools. So we have moved it in the past, whether it be Old Mill School or Allenwood School or to the intermediate school. So we would have to not only consider capital projects, but also consider our extended school year program.
Any other board members?
Yes, we have to consider the fact that if we do this, then we have to accept all religions. That's a consideration. So we threw prayer at a school, and I just don't get it. I know it makes money, but you're going to have all kinds of people showing up, or you have to be prepared for that, and you're not going to win. That's my 2 cents.
Linda?
Sure. I have, I guess, on that note, but each, well, this is no pro nor con, but I guess each situation is different still. So what might work for one group might not work for another group. In other words, the time, the activities, whatever it is. So I don't really have an issue with that. But I think it's also dependent upon educators that use the buildings the other 9 months of the year, and just ensuring that we're not disrupting their space that they use, for the majority of the year.
Well, with regard to that, it is an effort. I mean, you have to anticipate the facility would be, for the one being used on Sundays, it would be used in the mornings or through 3 o'clock in the afternoon on a Sunday. So we would have staff scheduled to be there during the day, both security and custodial services, because during the winter months you're going to have the boilers operating. But then we're also going to have staff there after their use to ensure that the buildings are meeting the standards that we expect for Monday morning, or that they're being cleaned and they're safe for use the following Monday morning. I mean, that's going to be work on a weekly basis. But again, I bring it back to one of the district goals and strategic plan is alternative source of revenue, and this is one source of revenue.
I'm in favor of the generation of the revenue, and I think that having it on a content neutral basis obviously is legally required, but I'm also in favor of that. And if this group wants to use the facilities and is we're going to be made whole in terms of our costs and then generate revenue, I think that's a win. That being said, I think 2 questions need to be answered that are a little bit more process. One is, we have a facility fee for a one-time use of a facility. And there's an application, the board policy says that you can apply for it, you get it, this is what it costs, we're willing to essentially allow the use of our facility for that set time period, that block of time. My question, the first question I think that arises is, this is a request for 51 uses, right? So this is a application for 51 blocks of time. So the first question is, at what threshold does this board want to have the final say over an application like that? In other words, would that be, or should that be, if somebody is willing to pay it and fills out the applications, that Brian as the business administrator should approve it? Or is there a number of weeks which should trigger board review because of the use and the extent of use of the facilities? I think the policy needs to be amended to take that into account, to either give no dividing line or provide a dividing threshold number that would trigger it. My other concern is that, and this perhaps could be more of a legal question, my other concern is that 51 weeks, 51 blocks of time starts to resemble a lot more akin to a lease. So my only concerns are, with a lease agreement, you have a lot more terms that are agreed upon between the parties, where perhaps there's termination clauses, there's default provisions, there's responsibilities, et cetera, that are better spelled out perhaps than on 51 separate applications. In addition, if you're going to do something more akin to a lease, there's obviously different procurement requirements that undergird those. If you're going to go for a lease, the question is, I have 51 weeks that I'm going to throw out there. My requirement under the state law is that I go out to bid and get the highest bidder. So I think that those two questions are intertwined, but I think those two questions have to be answered, A, for these specific applications, but B, also to make sure for going forward, we have a very specific and concrete framework that Brian and the board can work within.
Excuse me, I just have one more comment regarding, I guess, each situation is different, but the one application for 51 Sundays, and you said that was including classrooms?
Yes.
Oh, I mean, my own concern would be just things that students and teachers leave in the classrooms, you know, not locked up, like papers in drawers, things like that. I would be nervous that those would get disturbed and things would go missing or just, you know, things would happen. So that would be my concern for that.
Mr. Gross, do you have any response to what Tenant was talking about in terms of, I was asking if Mr. Gross had any thoughts about the things that Tenant brought up in terms of, would this be considered a lease? Does that make a difference? And other parameters.
I agree with what he said in just about every respect. I guess it's what you call it, and if we're going to call it a lease, then it would require different procedures. I certainly think a once-a-week facility use would not necessarily have to become a lease. You could make it a lease if you wanted to, but I'm not sure that just based upon the frequency, you would be required to make it a lease. But if you are going to use it as a lease, it takes it out of your policy with regard to the fees. You could charge more, you could charge less if it's a lease rather than a use of facility. And it takes the procedures out of the use of facility policy if you make it a lease. But then you are under the bidding laws and the bidding requirements. So I think it's a matter of, when you're dealing with these two kinds of situations, at least these two kinds of applications, I don't think you're going to be required to treat it as a lease or treat it as a use of facility. You can treat it really as either one, but you have to follow the procedures that are required under whichever road you decide to go down. With regard to how the wants to amend its policy to reflect those things, and most importantly to reflect when it no longer is a perfunctory administrative task to approve use of facility based on frequency or volume, then I think that's something certainly the policy committee should take a look at as to how you want to deal with that.
Is there, Mr. Smythe, is there a deadline for when you have to give them a response, or can we bring this back to policy at the beginning of December? Can we specifically discuss these applications with regards to the actual policy and maybe look at some of these holes and loops?
The summer camps seem to be a little bit more on a shorter notice requirement because they're trying to plan. The use on Sundays, we're looking to start next school year, perhaps July. So I believe we still have time. But with regard to whether we would move forward, I don't know that we would need to, especially in policy, if we're going to look to revise the policy, I don't know that we'd need to wait the 2 months to go through the policy procedure in order to make a decision, do we want to do this or not? So we can say.
I'm not even asking about amending the policy. I was just looking to go, like, do a deep dive on the policy because, I mean, I know that Mr. Adenisio's minutes had said to kind of reflect on it, and I know I went over the facility use policy before tonight, but I'm not sure how many other people did in preparation for this conversation, and so that was more my question, like, would we be able just to talk about it in policy and give other people a chance to maybe be better prepared for this conversation that might not have necessarily come to the table prepared for it tonight?
Okay. I have no problem letting anyone know that we're not approving any permits at this time, and it's going to be continued to be discussed.
With the understanding that you may lose that summer camp if you don't get back to them quicker because they're going to find a different facility. So, because I guess you have two options at this point. You can at least take a consensus this evening as to whether you want the administration to proceed in getting more detail, more specifics with regard to both of these applications, or you can just go back to policy with it without having the administration proceed with these two applicants and basically tell them, we're not ready to have this discussion yet with regard to moving forward.
I'm comfortable moving forward.
I was going to say, I think what Brian was looking for tonight was a direction from the board. Yes, let's pursue it, or no, it's off the table, because it's kind of at that point.
With regard to the process, however we do it, we
Right.
can work that out. Whether that requires revising the policy, whether it requires, a lease, and we're going to, go to bid, or it's going to be a facility use permit, and we're going to proceed with the policy and regulation we have. With regard to obtaining additional information, I'll look to answer whatever questions a board member has, but I think it comes down to, do we want to rent our facilities to obtain this alternate source of revenue on a regular, ongoing, long-term basis? With regard to the Sunday use, and then with regard to the summer, it's an intense, long-term use over the course of the summer.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but just to sum this up, pursuant to the existing policy, both of these applications comply, A, and B, we have the ability and the facilities available to provide to each of these applicants for the uses that these applicants are seeking. That's correct, right?
With regard to the use on Sundays, I would say yes. With regard to the use for a summer camp, we do have the facilities, but that would need to be coordinated or discussed, because they're flexible in the sense that they would like to have 300 students, attend a summer camp. Well, that's pretty intense at our elementary school levels. Coordinating with an extended school year, where could we accommodate them and still be confident that we could have the school ready for the summer, barring any capital improvement projects, just our regular annual maintenance and cleaning. But is there the possibility, and I would have this discussion with an outside group, can we move you halfway through the summer? There's been discussion of being flexible with regard to the number of participants in the summer camp, from 300 down to 100. So with regard to working out whether we can accommodate them, where we accommodate them, I think the administration could do that, and if we are unable to, then we would not approve the permit.
Then my sentiment is proceed.
One other question with regards to that. And now I've just lost it. You were able to solicit references or referrals with regards to the Sunday use. You talked to other school districts that have done this. Are there any other school districts that have done this summer camp?
There has. I've not had an opportunity to discuss with the one district that I know of that has the summer camp.
Okay.
But they weren't a reference for the one larger group. I actually have two groups looking to run a summer camp that we're, considering at this point.
Okay.
But I don't want to go down the road of, coordinating capital projects or extended school year if the decision of the board is, we'd rather keep the summers for the purposes of cleaning our buildings and making capital improvements in our facilities, and not look to obtain alternate sources of revenue by use of summer camps. That's really the direction I'm looking for from the committee and now from the board.
But we're skipping the most important thing. These are religious organizations. So we're bringing them into the school, which is a public school. I just want to get that point in.
I agree with Tenet. I think we should proceed. You did touch on something I was going to discuss. My concern with the summer camps would be, is it going to hinder our ability to get the schools ready for the fall? And I think that's something we just need maybe a little more detail about, and make sure that we're not going to encroach on that process.
I agree with Mr. MacArthur. I think we should proceed. My only caveat or hang up would be if it encroaches on our ability to prepare the schools or do capital improvements. But if you think you can figure out a way to make all those things happen, then I say proceed.
Madam President?
Oh.
Just one thing, because we kind of touched on it in our meeting that Ken has mentioned, it being a religious organization, that there's many organizations out there that consider themselves religious organizations where, in fact, they're probably really not. And so, I guess it's a two-part. what would give us the greatest amount of protection, Michael? Would it be a lease, or would it be, a facility use thing, permit, where, let's say, and I use this example in our meeting, the Church of Satan, let's say, because they believe they're a religious organization, and you can chuckle and say it's absurd, but what protection would the district have if, let's say, a group like that came and said, we want to use your facilities? Would we have to do it because we're giving it to another religious organization? Do we have the ability to say no? Or if they meet all the requirements, are we in a situation where we would have to do that if we're going down the permit road, as opposed to maybe a lease where you write it up and there's a number of outs, let's say?
Let me answer that two ways. First, I would never give my legal opinion at a public forum, but for general purposes, I will certainly let everyone know that regardless of whether we would take a lease option or a facility use option, the equal access and the First Amendment rights would still come into play regardless. So I don't think that would have any effect on our requirement under equal access. Now, how extensive that equal access would have to become and for what kinds of religious or other organizations, I would reserve that kind of discussion for our executive session discussions, because that will go into much more detail from a legal analysis.
So I'm in favor of us, bringing in additional revenue any way we can, because we are a school district. We're not producing things that make money, so something like this is almost like a gift for us. But I would be interested to hear what you think on that before maybe we say absolutely yes, let's move forward, because there could be something that comes up where it shines a light in the other direction where it might not be the most prudent thing for us.
I think we need to also keep in mind that the current policy and regulation references local church groups. So,
but local, but they're not a Wall Township church. So, so then it could be what's considered local.
Local Church of Satan's okay, but
No, but
the fact that the policy references a church group, I would interpret the policy and the regulation to allow religious groups to use our facilities.
Oh, and I don't see why not, but I just want to make sure that
we can pick and choose.
Yes, absolutely.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And that's what I have to tell you.
My question is, are we not allowing access already? For example, I'm just thinking dance recitals are popular, or schools are a popular venue, I should say, for dance recitals in June and what have you. So are we not doing that already, or we are? Okay, so this is not something new. It's just the extended period of time that we're talking about.
It's more intense, and with regard to neighbors and being in the community, we're utilizing our facility every Sunday, 51 Sundays out of the year, where the parking lot at the high school on Sunday morning, with a service at 9 o'clock, a service at 11 o'clock, the facility is going to be used from mid-morning to the mid-afternoon. So there's going to be 300 cars in the parking lot, or approximately. I'm guesstimating numbers, but which is different than what we've been accustomed to, the one-shot dance recital.
I'd be interested to know that if something happens that we don't agree to, because I don't think you're going to be able to figure out or ask somebody how they're going to practice their religion. And there's something that happens that we don't like. Now we're denying somebody their freedom of religion? I don't know that.
I'm sure we can put in no animal sacrifices or anything like that, right?
I don't think you can tell a person not to do that if that's part of their religion. If it's part of their religion.
If they had human sacrifice in a religion, we could prohibit it from the school.
Human,
And if they have
yes.
animal sacrifice, we can prohibit from it being done in the school. There's health codes, there's statutes, there's other public health and safety laws that protect us against that. I do think that this is one time where my personal beliefs align with what would be my legal opinion. I'm not the board attorney. I can talk about it. And that is either we allow access on a content-neutral basis to everybody, okay, or we don't. Nobody gets to use the facilities. We're a public entity. We're a public entity that has to provide either access to everyone on a content-neutral basis or no access. And frankly, under our existing policies that are in place that were adopted by the board at some point, they otherwise comply, other than the fact that there is the possibility to deny both of them, not on the fact or basis that they're religious organizations or their beliefs, but on the fact and basis that they might pose a strain on our facilities, which is legitimate. If somebody comes to me and says, I want to use your facility 51 weeks out of the year, there's a red light that goes off that says, wait a second, that sounds an awful lot like a lease, and it's not something that was entirely contemplated under the existing policy, because I don't know what's happening on the 32nd Sunday, if there's another event happening, or if there's capital maintenance or capital project or maintenance scheduled. But back to the original point, the board's either going to allow access to everybody on a content-neutral basis. Of course, there's going to be public health and safety and welfare laws that are enforced and abided by, and if there's violations of those, the group will not be permitted to return, or the board's not going to allow access to anybody. And as of right now, we allow access to everybody on a content-neutral basis.
I would also have to point out, I mean, we're looking at 51 individual permit uses, and if they fail to meet the requirements of our permits, then we can terminate, I would say, the future ones if it's, you know, gross negligence of our permits, and then we can just say, sorry, you can't come back.
I'm sorry, I have one more comment. I usually don't have this much to say, but the one thing that is sticking out in my mind, and I don't know why, is earlier in the school year when we had that stomach virus and people were complaining that the school wasn't clean enough. I'm just saying, is this going to be like, and in all seriousness, I mean, are people going to be complaining now with all these extra people in our school that now how are we going to keep our schools clean?
Well, I think that was part of the point, that, you know, there would be extra services that these groups would pay for to make sure that there wasn't anything detrimental happening to our schools. And the only way that I would approve something like this is with the assurance that we're going to be providing the extra services and that these organizations are going to be compensating us, so that we're not financially supporting their activities. They're supposed to be supporting us financially.
Well, it would be applied in accordance with our facility use policy and the fees that are currently on the schedule.
Right, and they, you know, we when we were revising those, we tried to cover every possible option. And, you know, obviously we, I guess, missed something in terms of a continued repetitive use. It was more for a single use, but that's really an aside. That we can handle that. That's easy. I have less of a problem with the every Sunday use than I do with the summer camp use, because, you know, their activities are going to be partially outside, I'm assuming, and, you know, there could be an impact to the community that surrounds the school. That's kind of a concern to me. I'd be personally willing to say, okay, let's pursue the every Sunday, and let's give a little more thought to the summer camp, even though I know that's the one that requires a more quick turnaround time. But I think my comfort level on that one is a little less.
And just to follow up on that point, wouldn't the potential damage to the fields be greater than the potential damage to the classrooms and the auditorium in the high school are here, in the sense that, look, grass doesn't grow back that easily. I'd want some assurances that wherever they were going to have summer camp, whichever facility, that the damage to the fields wasn't going to be to the extent that when the children come back in the fall, they're not going to be outside on dirt patches.
Absolutely, I agree with that 100%. And actually, I have some questions about what those summer camps would be wanting to do. Are they going to want to set up an above-ground swimming pool outside, or like those are details that I think would be really important. Do you know?
No, because we would never allow that.
Okay.
That would be something we would have control of.
Okay, because that could be a deal breaker, because I have seen camps in other locations, and that was one of the things that they did. So maybe if we ask a few probing questions, we may have our answer of whether to pursue that or not.
But I think this is all a great illustration as to why some of this needs to be discussed at policy, right, going forward. Now, on the existing question, I think there's a consensus that the summer camp is going to take more time, but on the other issue, is there a board consensus in terms of proceeding on the Sundays?
Can we have a raise your hand if you want to proceed with the Sunday church? So we have. So we can proceed with that.
Can you say the name so the tape recorder can hear who just raised their hand? You don't want people to know?
It's not a vote. It's only consensus.
This is a consensus. It's not a vote.
Excuse me,
Ms.
it is
Cross.
not public comment period.
So why did you say the name? Do you not want people to know?
Is there a warning?
We're not
Okay.
done with FNF.
Walking in front of me. Who were the people?
Okay. Excuse me, we have some other finance and facilities business to conduct, and you're free to make comments later on in the meeting when it's appropriate.
With regard to the other topic was the long-range facility plan and whether we were going to look to reappropriate funds. We had a draft long-range facility plan that was discussed. We talked about air conditioning. And the discussion on capital improvements would, expedite the decision on summer camp. So I don't know if we want to expand on, we budgeted $2.8 million for the use of for the transportation facility. We've made arrangements to not have to build one at this time, that we're have a shared service agreement with Howell, so the board discussion was to reallocate those funds. Is the board comfortable or okay with having a discussion with regard to facility projects at this time to be considered?
Yes.
Not to approve specific projects, but whether we're going to proceed with reallocating funds.
I say
think there was
yes.
a draft report with FNF, but I have an updated one where I tried to, based on the FNF discussion, there was, I totaled some numbers, if we can.
I think maybe one short. One more, Brian?
Sure. And, Ms. Dyer, can I replace that, please?
Taking this one back.
That's the clean one.
Yes.
That's the one I'm
Stricken out for the record.
Can you just clarify that one more time? We're reappropriating. Sorry.
Okay, I'll go through it again. We
Thank
had, as part of the 18-19 budget, we budgeted $2.8 million for, I think it was $2.85 million for the construction of the transportation facility. Since approving the budget, we've entered into a shared service agreement with Howell Township to house our buses in that facility. We do anticipate some capital improvements. What that looks like, we're going to, any expansion needs, requirements to house our buses are going to be shared between Howell and Wall Township. However, things specific to the district, whether it be an office trailer or bathroom facilities for our use, would be a cost borne strictly by Wall Township. That doesn't need to be a capital expenditure in the first year. It could be a lease agreement, a rental. That decision would still need to be made. However, the discussion by the board was to reallocate those funds for other capital projects that we did not include in the budget because the priority was the transportation facility. So the F&F committee has been discussing projects to include in the long-range facility plan, and at the last meeting, there was a number of projects that exceeded the amount that was budgeted for the transportation facility, so we prioritized them to some degree, but again, similar to the facility use application, the committee wanted to have the discussion with the full board. So the projects are listed, proposed for the 18-19 school year. The ones that were being discussed to be considered for the current school year, I created the additional column. The ones that are highlighted in gray are ones related to air conditioning, and the ones that are in the second column but not highlighted are other projects. The total of all the projects is $2.4 million. $1,990,000 are related to air conditioning at all the schools, and the other projects are $415,000. That's a total cost of $2,405,000. That would leave $445,000 for any improvements that we would need to make for the shared service agreement with Howell Township, which, at this stage, I believe are sufficient funds for that use. And again, these are very preliminary estimates with regard to these projects, and they would be refined as we went through the year. And the majority of these projects would be projects that we would perform during the summer. We would not be in a position to be able to do them during the school year, hence the impact on whether we would approve summer camps at these schools. So I don't know if anyone from the committee wanted to expand on the discussion from F&F.
Yes, there is something to expand. A lot of these projects are not nice to do things. A lot of these projects are very important. Safety issues, paving, there's a lot of things involved with it. And we have an opportunity to take care of these things now.
I agree.
Yeah, and I think we had a very robust and great discussion at the F&F committee meeting. I think it was very productive. And I'm absolutely, and I think most of us are absolutely in favor of proceeding. Now, in terms of which ones we're going to select, I think that that's going to be the ultimate discussion and decision. But I think from a principled standpoint, and Ralph, correct me if I'm wrong, but the committee we're very much in favor of this.
Absolutely. We do go round and round on many different topics of things that need to get done, and we're in a pretty good situation right now where we can knock off a lot of things that will make a difference. And I believe everybody on the committee, right, was absolutely in favor of doing this, and it just comes down to refining the list a little bit and I guess communicating with which has been done with the principals, seeing what they feel the most important priorities, and just nailing it down and going out to bid and getting these things done.
Well, from the initial list, I moved over those projects the committee were in a discussion recommending, or which ones were prioritized, considering leaving some funds remaining for the purposes of the transportation facility. So the projects that are listed in the second column would be the ones that we would be looking to move forward with a budgetary number at this point of $2.4 million. Now, the list could be refined as we proceed through the year, that as we hire a consultant and they do a more accurate cost estimate based on the design, if these numbers go down, perhaps we can add additional projects to the current school year, or if the certain projects costs exceed what we've estimated at this time, then we can refine the list that we would actually move forward and go to bid with. As we move through the year, we'll also refine what our needs will be for the shared service with Howell, so to more clearly identify what the budgetary number will be for them. But again, I think the $445,000 is more than safe for those purposes.
So just a question for clarification, if I'm looking at this. So, for example, Allenwood, number 1, paved parking lot. There's no numbers in there, so that means that that's not included, correct?
Correct.
And just so you know too, that like the 1 through 9, number 1 isn't the most important. It's just everything just listed.
We tried to put a note up top, projects are not listed in priority order.
Right, and to Ken's point and Ralph's point previously, and they're both in agreement, is that what we were seeking to do was looking at things that are concerns, safety concerns, hazard concerns, and address those first, in addition to the longstanding concern and issue of quality of life and quality of education that arises from the lack of education, air conditioning in certain buildings in our district.
$40,000 to replace the second basketball court seems very high.
Well, as part of the committee discussion, we were all in agreement that these were very worthwhile things, and we wanted to have a full board discussion, but I think we were recommending that the board move forward with these projects.
Yeah, but we were just budgeting. We're not consultants. We have experts that are going to tell us about this, and the experts liable to say it's going to cost you $15,000. I don't know. I don't know what he's going to say.
Right, absolutely. But so to move to the next step, in other words,
Exactly.
that's what the recommendation is, that these projects are worthwhile and that we should start looking into them in earnest.
And I'm sorry for omitting your name in the discussion, but you were also in agreement. Yes.
I deserve that, though. I set a precedent for that this evening. So do we have a
I agree.
consensus?
I think we should move forward.
I'm okay with moving forward.
Okay, looks like we have a consensus.
Thank you.
Okay. Board members, no one else had any further questions for Mr. Adonisio?
I just wanted to, I guess, see if Michael will have a discussion with us. Yeah,
Absolutely.
okay.
You
Because
want to do that tonight, or you want to do that at your next meeting, whatever you guys would prefer?
I don't think there's a need to do it tonight, because with the direction of moving forward with capital projects, I think that would put a real strain trying to coordinate summer camps with these capital projects that we just discussed. So we'll look at it further, and I would not be looking for the board, even if it's going to be conceptually, we can look to do that. But I will not be in a position this month or next to be approving summer camps. So based on our plan now to move forward with capital projects.
Okay, all right.
Okay, so then we can wait and have a conceptual conversation about how to move forward at a more leisurely.
Your decision, I'm just wanted to let you know
Right,
that.
okay. So public relations did not meet this month, but negotiations did. Mr. MacArthur, do you have an update?
Just a brief update. The committee met on November 13th. We met from 6:30 to approximately 8:30, and we just continued our discussions in preparation for our upcoming negotiations with the WTEI.
Thank you very much. At this time, I'd like to open the floor for public comment. This is on action items that are on the agenda, action items only at this point. If you would like to make comment, please come up to the podium. And I think, is there a paper up there? And please sign in and state your name and place of residence. And as per policy, please confine your comments to 5 minutes duration.
Is the meeting being tape recorded?
Yes.
Is it being video recorded? Live streamed? Just checking. Thank you. Betsy Cross, I live in Wall Township. Could you go over the people that raised their hands? I missed that. People were walking by. I just want to know who approved.
I'm.
Ms. Cross, can you please make your comments about
Can
the
you just
action,
answer that
about
simple
the action
question?
items? So I'm going to interrupt you because there are occasions when we interrupt you and we get chastised for that, and then you want us to interrupt. So make your comments pertaining to the action items, and if and when appropriate, a response will be made.
Right. If people are walking in front of me and I can't see who raised their hand, I would appreciate for you to just say who raised their hand. So, and if somebody's listening to a tape recording, they know who it was. You should just do that in future. It's common sense. Can you go over, I mean, I'm kind of disappointed to see we're hiring a wraparound person and we're paying them the same amount as we're paying a school teacher. Somebody's working 35 hours a week as a supervisor for a wraparound program. What in the world is going on? If I was Mr. Nardino, whose name is underneath that, I'd be furious. So he's been here for 12 years, is probably working 60 hours a week, and you're paying somebody $63,000 to be a supervisor for wraparound. You gotta be kidding. I see this sidebar agreement for the music program. Could you let me know who was, where this came about? I see they're looking to do a stipend for the 5th and 6th grade. Who were the people that are going to be the people getting the stipend? I don't see that listed. And just how did this come about? I'd like to hear that. I did ask in the past, what has the new music supervisor been doing? And Mr. McGee, you were raving about her, but you couldn't give me any examples. So if I could get some examples on that tonight, I'd appreciate it. I know a lot of students have not seen the music supervisor anywhere. I have not seen her at a football game, so I'm just wondering what she's doing. I see we've now lost another person in our music program in Central School. So what have we lost? 3 music people in 6 months? I think a lot of people kind of expected that when you hired a music supervisor. So now you've lost another person. What else? Kelly Doyle is now going to be getting $20 an hour, and she is a Central School wraparound group leader. That's a lot of money on top of the $63,000 for Colin McIntosh. I'm not for any of this to do with renting out the school for anything. After seeing how Mr. Smythe handled renting out the location, I think at Allenwood or Central, for a soccer team for 50 cents a person who ruined our fields, I don't think he has the ability to just be deciding this tonight. That's why I was interested in knowing who raised their hand. I know Dory raised her hand. Anybody else is willing to raise their hand that did it before? I'd just like to know who you were. After that fiasco, the last thing we need to be doing is approving tonight to do anything renting out our school facilities. I'm concerned about insurance. Somebody comes here, something terrible happens, somebody dies, whatever, on our premises. Who's picking up the tab for that with the insurance? We're going to have 300 kids from God knows where, some religious group from God knows where, because it's an open season. I'm not for it. You need to do a lot more work. I want to know who the references are. I want to know who the summer camps are. I want to know who's looking at it, so you could research those groups. I wouldn't move forward with anything based upon what you told me tonight. Forget it. Where's that list that you were going over, the grade column and this column? Is that in this package tonight about the air conditioning? It would have been nice if it was in here and if you could have told us to how we could follow along. Yeah, sure, these things are long overdue. But the fiasco with the bus compound contract, I'm still waiting for answers. And to see that Mr. Smythe's minutes came back in executive session, all the questions that were asked were not documented. So, this is what happens. Everything gets done in a back room, questions are answered, and the public never knows what they are.
Ms. Cross, your time is up.
I'd like you to answer my questions. Ms.
you.
Wodniak, you
And-
just got reelected. Start answering questions and start replying
Thank
to
you.
emails.
Is there anyone else for public comment?
My name is Andrew Tufts, and I live in town. And yes, I applied to be on the board. I know I was not elected, but thank you for the opportunity to run. I really enjoyed it. We put our names here. Just so I'm clear, you guys, the board, just approved that you were going to continue talking about proposals that were going to come to the school. You haven't decided that you are going to approve the summer camp at the school yet. You haven't approved that the Liquid Church is going to be in the school yet. You've just said we're going to talk about it further so we can figure out the legalities of it and how the facilities are going to be used correctly. Am I understanding that?
That's correct. That's not an action item on today's agenda.
Okay. Am I allowed to comment on? Am I allowed to comment on that discussion, on the way the facilities are going to be used?
It's not an action item, so at the last public comment portion, you're free to make comment on those items.
Then, as long as you guys have not approved anything yet, and you're just going to talk about the best way to do it, I am good for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else for public comment? Seeing none, I'll close public comment. So I have a couple of responses. First of all, I would suggest that if you haven't read the regulation and the policy for facility use, that you do read those, because there are requirements for organizations to provide evidence of insurance coverage. It's quite in-depth, and there are many protections for the district. And in terms... Policy 7510. In terms of prior facility use permits, those are issued as per policy and regulation. And nobody takes it upon themselves as a whim to just issue permits to whomever they want. There's a policy and regulation that's followed. Okay. At this time, can we have... we'll move to old business. Can I have a motion to approve the secretary's minutes from October 16th?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Any questions or comments from board members? Seeing none, may I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Adenizio?
Yes.
Ms. Bradley?
Yes.
Ms. Connolly?
Yes.
Mr. McGee?
Yes.
Mr. MacArthur?
Yes.
Ms. Malloy?
Yes.
Mr. Wondrak?
Yes.
Mr. Wondrak?
Yes. Motion carried. Do board members have any other items for old business? Thank you. Seeing none, we will move to new business, and these are new business action items. Policy. Can I have a motion, please, to approve the first readings after public hearing?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
At this time, I'll open the floor for public comment about the first readings on the agenda. Seeing no public comment, I will close the public hearing. Are there any comments or questions from board members pertaining to this motion? Okay, seeing none, may I have a roll call, please?
Ms. Bradley?
Yes.
Ms. Connolly?
Yes.
Mr. McGee?
Yes.
Mr. MacArthur?
Yes.
Ms. Malloy?
Yes.
Mr. Wondrak?
Yes.
Mr. Adenizio?
Yes.
Ms. Waniak?
Yes. Motion carried. There were no second readings this month. And so now we'll move to the Board of Education report. Can I please have a motion to approve item 15A, B, and C?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Are there any questions or comments from board members? Seeing none, may I have a roll call, please?
Ms. Connolly?
Yes.
Mr. McGee?
Yes.
Mr. MacArthur?
Yes.
Ms. Malloy?
Yes.
Mr. Wonjak? Yes. Mr. Adenizio?
I'm going to abstain. I have a family member in the WTEA.
Ms. Bradley?
Yes.
Ms. Wonjak?
Yes. Motion carried. Mrs. Dyer, the superintendent's report, please.
Good evening. With regard to item 16, can I have a motion on consent agenda for items A through R?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Are there any questions or comments from the board for Mrs. Dyer? Seeing none, may I have a roll call, please.
Mr. McGee?
Yes.
Mr. MacArthur?
Yes.
Ms. Malloy?
Yes.
Mr. Wonjak? Yes. Mr. Adenizio?
Yes.
Ms. Bradley?
Yes.
Ms. Connolly? Yes. Mr. Woniak?
Yes, motion carried. I just want to say that on behalf of the board, how grateful we are and appreciative for the generous donations that we've just accepted. And now, Mr. Smythe, the business office.
Okay, under item 17, I ask for a motion to approve items 17A through K by consent agenda.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Lieutenant McGee was the first motion, is that correct? Mr. MacArthur, second.
Yes.
Questions, comments? Mr. MacArthur?
Yes.
Ms. Malloy?
Yes.
Mr. Wonjak?
Yes.
Mr. Adenizio?
Yes.
Ms. Bradley?
Yes.
Ms. Connolly?
Yes.
Mr. McGee?
Yes.
Mr. Woniak?
Yes to all with the exception of letter C, the bills list. I'm abstaining from PO 19-01223 as it pertains to me. Motion carried. Is there any other new business from board members?
Only that I'm not sure you're ever going to have to air condition. What is the temperature in here?
It won't be like this in May and June when we have our concerts. So, at this time, I'll open the floor for public comment on any matter of community interest.
Yeah, Andrew Tufts, Wall Township. For the summer camp, I was curious, it says they want to use one of the elementary schools in the liquid blurb, the liquid church blurb. It's a little more specific on what they want to use, but I'm just curious for the summer camp, are they going to be using bathrooms, any of the gym facilities? Are they strictly going to be outside? I would like that to be considered. And the other thing I would like to be considered is when you open up the classroom to children from outside the district or from anywhere, you're opening up teachers' safe space, basically. The most stressful day of the school week for a teacher is Sunday, let alone Monday. Teachers coming into the classroom on Monday to classrooms that have been used by some other organization that maybe they're familiar with, maybe they've gotten used to working with over time, just raises the tension level for teachers. And I don't know if that's something we want to do. I also don't know if we want a bunch of, this is Sunday school, so it's predominantly going to be young kids. I would just be a little hesitant about having a bunch of elementary kids in high school classrooms. And then again, you're going to have to think about preparing these teachers for leaving their classroom on a Friday, setting up that classroom for some other organization to use it. So I would just ask that you consider the teacher's perspective when you're opening up their classrooms to other groups. That was all that I had. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else for public comment?
Good evening. I'm Lauren Albrecht. I live in Wall Township. I'm here for public comment in response to some discussion that was raised at last month's meeting regarding the State of New Jersey School Board Association's policy NJSA 18A 36 through 41, which directs the Commissioner of the New Jersey Department of Education to establish guidelines to provide direction for schools in addressing common issues concerning the needs of transgender students. I have the policy here. There are other members of the Wall Township community that would like to be here today. However, today is Transgender Day of Remembrance, where the community celebrates the lives of transgender people lost in the past year to violence and suicide at a rate 40 times higher than that relative to the non-trans population. There's a section of NJSA 18A that states school personnel may not disclose information that may reveal a student's transgender status except as allowed by law. Schools are advised to work with the student to create an appropriate confidentiality plan regarding the student's transgender or transitioning status. Policy goes on to say, due to a specific and compelling need, such as the health and safety of the student or an incident of bias-related crime, a school district may be obligated to disclose a student's status. School districts should inform the student that the school district intends to disclose the student's transgender status for the student's protection and well-being. Prior to disclosure, the student should be given the opportunity to personally disclose that information. This is very, very different than a teacher or educator or counselor disclosing that information on behalf of the student to the parent. Policy also says school districts should make every effort to ensure that only any disclosure is made in a way that reduces or eliminates the risk of redisclosure and protects the transgender student from further harassment. Again, this is only in the specific and compelling situation of a child's safety. This does not equate the transgender identity itself to being the specific and compelling need for disclosure to a parent. I was dismayed to hear the comments of at least 2 seated Wall Township Board of Education members likening a student's transgender identity to tardiness, and the assertion that parents should be notified so that school psychologist and the child study team could be involved. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the child study team works in conjunction with students with learning disabilities, so I'm not really sure why they would be involved in this issue. It's not a learning disability. There appears to be a misunderstanding on the part of at least 2 board members about the nature of transgender identity. Fortunately, there are many, many resources available to those who would seek to enlighten themselves, which I would hope that board members would want to do for the benefit of the students they serve. It's my strong suggestion that before this board attempts to draft any resolution that is in opposition to the New Jersey School Board Association's policy on this matter, the members of this board educate themselves in the situation faced by transgender students. The NJSA has written this policy in conjunction with leading educators and clinicians in the state. It is supported by evidence-based fact and measurable data concerning alienation at home by students who are outed to their parents by their educators. And when a board member asserts during the meeting that a parent be notified of a student's transgender identity and flippantly likens it to a day-by-day choice or tardiness, the message is sent to those students in this school district that their identity is not as important as they believe it is and their voice is not heard. The consequences faced by an outed child at home may be beyond the comprehension of anyone who is fortunate enough to have been raised in a loving and accepting and inclusive environment. A standard across the board outing of all students expressing transgender identity will do more harm than good. And that's all I got.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Anyone else for public comment?
Betsy Cross, 11 Wall. Ms. Wading, I'm just wondering why you answer Andrew's questions before. When he came right up, you just jumped right out and answered it. And when I ask questions, you don't answer anything. If I send you an email, you don't acknowledge you receive it. I think it's discrimination. I think that's going to be a problem. I don't know why you operate that way. I take my time to come here. I think I ask good questions, and you just sit there. And when I send an email, say, please acknowledge receipt, you don't even reply. And you ran on your platform of experience and what a great job you do. I'm not seeing it. I'd like the answers to my questions before. And I would also like the board to go over, Mr. Gross, Mr. McGee, and Mr. Smythe to go over his comments last month about Mr. Smythe's approval for $20,000, which when you look in the minutes, it's not there. So I've asked a couple people to look at it. Dory, do you want to get up and leave? I'm sorry, am I boring you? Okay, so go. Good. Yeah. Gotta be kidding. Yeah. Right, 2004, right. Then Mr. Smythe moves in to be the assistant business administrator. He doesn't even submit a resume. No, it goes on and on and on, and here we are in 2018, and he's doing the same thing. I put in an Oprah request, he changes it, and then he sends back something else. Something's not right, and it hasn't been right for a very long time. A very, very long time. And I'm so disappointed in this board. I mean, for the other people, at least, you know, they had some type of excuse. You have no excuse whatsoever after everything that's gone on with Jack Hahn, James Hable, and Mr. Smythe's been there all along. You know, he was helping him cash out his 722 sick days for Mr. Hahn. He was not attaching the settlement agreement for $430,000 that the public knew nothing about. Mr. Hahn sued. He got more money. He got more money, more money, more money. And it was all coming out while Mr. Smythe was the business administrator. Have you read any of this, Mr. McGee? You're an attorney. Read it over. So I've asked a couple other state agencies to look at it because nothing is getting better. It's a very, very sad state of affairs. So I know you'd love for me to not come to these meetings, but I'll keep coming because I'm not having you waste my money. And I'd like you to answer my questions, Ms. Wodniak. I'm sure you're rushing to get to St. Stephen's Green with a few people up here, but answer the questions.
Thank you. Anyone else for public comment? Seeing none, I'll close public comment.
Madam President, could I provide two clarifications with regard to public comment? First being that the accusation or allegation, I'm not sure what we're calling them these days, that I changed an Oprah request and I sent back something else. That is absolutely incorrect. I did not change any Oprah request, and I provided a response according to the requirements of Oprah in response to the request. Second misstatement was with regard to, again, another allegation that I was the business administrator. I guess at the time of 2004, I was not the business.
And I never said
that I did not attach the settlement agreement with for Mr. Hahn. Again, I think the reference is 2004. I was not the business administrator as stated during public comment.
Yes, Mrs. Sawodniak, I'll just clarify that before the board approves a stipend, they have to approve the sidebar agreement that allows for that stipend. So the board has approved tonight a sidebar agreement for 3 different things. Now those positions will be posted. People can apply for those positions, and a recommendation will be made to award those stipends to personnel at the December meeting.
Thank you very much for that clarification. Any comments from board members?
Only that I would love it for the forum to be restored perhaps at some point. It's been pointed out numerous times with the case law that somebody that does not bring somebody from the audience to catcalls and interrupt, be truculent, be repetitious. And otherwise, if the person was doing this in a classroom, they get detention, right? Just because you're coming here as a member of the public doesn't give you the right. And you don't have the right under the law to do this, engage in this kind of conduct.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I just want to say before we convene for the evening to everybody have a happy Thanksgiving, and that's it.
Thank you. May I have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Meeting's adjourned. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.